The Colts pounded the Texans for their first win of the year on Sunday, but they lost their young star quarterback for the game in the process. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen post-game. This is your daily podcast covering the Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is presented by LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Hello, everybody. I am Jake Arthur, and he is Zach Hicks. You know the two of us from horseshoehuddle.com. And let's just rush into this one real quick. 31-20 win for the Colts on the road. Their first win since week 10 of last year. That was an 8-game losing streak previous. Zach told me a nice little stat before this. Their first multi-score win since that Jonathan Taylor Patriots game 2 years ago, back when Carson Wentz was the quarterback. So this was kind of a streak breaker of sorts. The Colts have needed this kind of win for a while. Really set the tone throughout. There was some times where the Texans came up and showed some life, made things a little interesting, but truly the Colts were in control from start to finish. The big story of the game, obviously, despite the win, just to bring the vibes down a little bit, I guess. So Anthony Richardson left the game with a concussion in the second quarter. But not after, not until looking really, really good before then. He pretty much owned that first quarter. The first 2 drives of the game, he had rushing touchdowns on him. So he looked good before he left. Gardner Minshew came in and picked up where he left off, helped put the Colts in cruise control and ultimately win the game. So, Zach, give me your takes.
Yeah, so, starting with Anthony Richardson, obviously we'll talk about the hit, protecting yourself, and not wanting to see this type of injury in your young quarterback. But to just talk about how he played before he went out in this game. That first drive of the game was one of the smoothest looking offensive drives. It was such a smooth drive for a Colts offense where, last week, again, they had 64% of their drives were 3 and outs. And then if you go back to last season, every single drive was a 3 and out. It was like 99% of their drives were 3 and outs last year. They couldn't even complete passes last season. They couldn't do anything. So to see that type of drive to start the game, I think he was 5 of 6 on that first drive for his 56 yards. He had a couple rushes. He finished it off with that 18-yard rushing touchdown as well. Just really, really good opening drive. And then he capitalized on the second drive as well after the turnover with that really fancy reverse play that Shane Steichen drew up. Really gorgeous play design that he walked in for that second touchdown. Now, it is unfortunately he left the game early, but it's a long season. Injuries happen. I'm not trying to downplay a concussion because we know how concussions are. Concussions are very serious injuries. And you don't want to sit here and say, oh, it's just concussion, he'll be back. No, concussions are very serious. We've talked about this with Shaquille Leonard in the past as well. Concussions are extremely serious, but once hopefully he can get through the concussion protocol and we can get him back on the field because as of right now, the arrows are pointing up for him as long as he's healthy. He needs to get healthy, he needs to protect himself. And obviously we'll talk about that. That'll be a big thing we talk about all week this week. But when he's been on the field this year, he's looked smooth. He's looked in control. He's looked like a really developed passer. And then the running game has been great as well. So I think there's a lot of positive to look at with Anthony Richardson. Yes, you would like to see him finish a game. You'd like to see him not go down with this type of concussion, but it's early in the season. He's going to learn to protect himself. He's still a young player that is used to playing Superman his entire career when it comes to having the ball in his hands. I think this could be kind of a good lesson, a really hard lesson to learn. Again, concussion, you don't want to have to learn a lesson this way, but I think this is a good lesson for him to learn early in the season. And if he can come back and still look like the quarterback we saw these first 2 weeks, but protect himself a little bit more, we're looking at a really developed young quarterback that's really promising. So I don't want to look at this injury and say oh, woe is me. Oh, woe is the Colts. Let's be all depressed about this injury. It's let's look at the positives these first 2 games. The Colts offense and Anthony Richardson look way ahead of schedule through 2 weeks. And once they get him back from this injury, we can continue to hopefully be ahead of schedule with this offense.
Yeah, and to the topic of protecting yourself, because I'm sure we've both seen it a million times already. The play in question, I think the assumption is that he got the concussion on that second touchdown run.
Right.
Got hit by the defender, and then his head hit the ground when he kind of careened off of him. Looking back at that play, like it just seemed kind of fluky. There was really no one in the wrong. Like Richardson and any other ball carrier is going to do essentially the same thing. Like maybe they brace for impact a little more, but generally that's how football is played when you're the ball carrier. The defender smoked him, no doubt, and it was you could consider it late within it and wasn't necessary, but at the same time, Richardson was approaching the goal line, and the defender was just trying to, I'm assuming, dislodge the ball from him. Just trying to not make it a cakewalk for him. So there's really no one in the wrong. Richardson on that play in particular, I didn't think abandoned caution or anything like that. Like I thought it was just a football play.
Well, and again, the thing we had to say about Richardson is I don't want to bring up like the Paris Campbell thing or whatever, but it's not like when Paris Campbell was always getting hurt, especially early in his career, it wasn't that it was like he was being reckless or anything like that. It's just he took weird hits. He took weird hits and it hurt him. It's like with Anthony Richardson, where it's like the first run of his career last week, sure, he should have ducked out of bounds, and that's where he hurt his ankle. And then the very end of the game, he's trying to make too much happen. But besides that, he was really safe. He was pretty safe throughout all that. In this game, through an entire quarter of play, he takes one hit. And that one hit, he falls on his back and hits his head. Like, I don't want to say like injury prone or, oh my gosh, he's not protecting himself or anything like that. It's just part of football. You sometimes take some bad hits and you got to hope that you can mitigate those bad hits. Sure, I would love for him to duck and cover a little bit more going into the end zone like that. Don't even expose yourself to a big hit. But at the end of the day, it's football. You're going to get hit, especially if you're a big running quarterback like him. And you just got to hope that you can mitigate the damage on those types of hits. But before we get out of this first segment, Jake, we do have to talk about Gardner Minshew.
Yeah.
Gardner Minshew comes in, and we're going to talk about this more in segment 2 when we talk about Shane Steichen in particular. But for Shane Steichen to have that backup game plan just ready for Gardner Minshew, because obviously that was not the game plan they were going to run with Anthony Richardson when Gardner Minshew came in the game. Obviously, you weren't calling QB runs for Gardner Minshew. But to just have that spare game plan on plans like, okay, cool, Gardner Minshew's coming in, heavy RPOs, heavy quick hitters, more runs with Zach Moss, and the offense still moved pretty freely and it flowed really well after that. I mean, 2 straight scoring drives right after Anthony Richardson leaves the game. That just speaks volume to Gardner Minshew being able to get ready and go out there, but also to Shane Steichen and his ability to have that second game plan available. Minshew comes in, does his job, does everything right, and the Colts end up getting the blowout victory.
Yeah, it seemed as if on the first few drives when Minshew took over, the Colts were able to kind of operate how they wanted to. The passing game was rhythmic. They were able to get some things after the catch, picked up first downs. Like they were really, really efficient. Like you mentioned, Zach Moss, really solid performance out of him. 3 scoring drives for Minshew right off the bat. 2 of those were for touchdowns. They were nice sustained drives too. They averaged 75.5 yards on 10 plays on those 2 touchdown scoring drives. Even the field goal one was like 55 yards. So moved the ball really well there, different receivers and things like that. They'll live that way. Like obviously there's a ceiling to it when it's not Anthony Richardson out there, but like just the game plan that was drawn up in that instance was pretty solid. I did not have any issues with that whatsoever.
Yeah. One thing I do want to touch on is like, unless Richardson clears concussion protocol by like Wednesday, I'd probably hold him out this next game. Again, don't rush it. 21 years old. He's only been in the NFL for, this is going into his 3rd game coming up. Unless he's absolutely cleared, like be safe with it. And you have a good backup. You have a backup that can manage the offense and get things moving. Don't need to rush him out there. I know there's a need to just see him and get him more snaps. And trust me, I want to get him on the field. But, unless it's super clear that he's ready to go and you feel like you've been able to get him ramped up throughout all week, I wouldn't force him out there this week against the Baltimore Ravens, who have a defense that's going to bring a lot of pressure, bring a lot of physicality, a lot of hits. I'm not saying that you hide him because of his, potential to get hit again, but I feel like this is the type of defense where you need a couple practices under your belt to kind of get the flow of the week and get the flow of the game plan under you. You don't want to go into this game blind. And if he's in the concussion protocol all the way up until Saturday, I would say just go with Gardner Minshew in this next game.
Yeah, like you said, unless the timeline is pretty quick, like because you have to get through a limited practice and then a full practice. So like you want Anthony to get through a full week of practice especially for a defense like this. So that makes a lot of sense. So here in a minute, we're going to move on and talk about some of the rest of the offensive playmakers and how they stood out. But first, let's talk about our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Just add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Then, simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And not to be outdone, we're also going to talk about our friends at PrizePicks because it's the most fun that I've had winning up to 25 times my money this football season. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their stat projections, and then you place your entry. It's really simple to play. I personally can make my picks and submit my entries in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of player props and just anything that you want to bet on. Like there's something for everybody. That's what makes PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy.
And Everydayers, we'll be back on Tuesday morning to talk all about this Colts victory. We'll have time to digest the film at that point and really go into the Shane Steichen game plan that led to the Colts just dismantling this DeMeco Ryans defense. So make sure you guys are here for Locked On Colts on Tuesday morning. And Jake, I think that's a great segue into this Colts offense. Obviously, we're going to talk about a lot of the individual players and what they did. But again, I think we really need to have our hats off here for Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen, new head coach, play caller. Last week, it wasn't the prettiest. I know I saw a lot of people coming out and saying it was a terrible game plan that they had for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Colts offense just didn't flow under Shane Steichen. Well, they come out this week, albeit against a shorthanded defense, a defense that's not that great, but a really good defensive play caller in DeMeco Ryans, and they just dismantled them the entire game. I mean, again, the second half, maybe they played a little too conservative. They only had, I think, 4 possessions in the second half, and one of them they had a long drive for a field goal. And then the other ones, they moved the ball a little bit, but not a ton. But for the most part, I mean, this was just a dominant showing by the Colts offense, even when their backup quarterback came in. They just completely dismantled this Texans defense. And, hats off to Shane Steichen in this one. Phenomenally called game. Again, this is probably the best game I've seen called by a Colts play caller since when Frank Reich dismantled the Jets, I think 2 or 3 years ago, that Thursday night or Sunday night game, whatever the heck that was. It reminds me a lot of that one where it was just like from start to finish, this was just a play caller on one side of the ball, just toying with another play caller. It just wasn't even a close game whatsoever from that perspective. And also in a lot of other ways, Shane Steichen outcoached DeMeco Ryans. I mean, that punt fake or whatever to get the offense back on the field to force Ryans to call a timeout. It's just a really, really good, confident game by Shane Steichen. I thought he did a lot of great things in this. And if you're someone like me who was super high on the Shane Steichen hire in the offseason, seeing a game like this where the Colts came out and they just kind of dominated a team they should have beat. This is such a promising sign for the Colts. This wasn't a letdown game. This wasn't a game where they were going to roll over just because they should have won. They came out and they showed that they deserved to win this game early and often. And a lot of that starts with the head coach. So Shane Steichen, before we get into the offense, I just want to go on that little tangent about him. This was a really, really well-coached game from all facets of being a head coach.
Yeah, as the kids say, he was in his bag on this one.
Yes.
I mean, I understood some people's gripes from week one, like whether it was situationally or just like play calls on fourth down, whatever. I got it. Like it was whatever. But on this one, I thought he was really, really smooth. You can see, we've seen it, especially with the Colts. Like they just get, it feels like they get stuck if their game plan isn't working, and it's like they can't adapt whatsoever. And it just seemed like whatever they tried, they found a way to do it, whether it was getting, the rhythmic passes and the short to intermediate stuff to get first downs, and not just going for the tiny stuff, but like going for the sticks, going for the first downs. Like I just thought in general, they were able to move the ball well. Again, Zach Moss, very welcome return to the lineup. 18 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown. Also 4 receptions for 19 yards. Dominated the backfield. I think he saw like all but just a couple of the snaps at running back today. So that guy was a workhorse in his debut for the season. Very, very well done. And to do that, I mean, he pretty much did that against the Texans last year. But to do it without Anthony Richardson right there next to him, carving things up as well throughout the majority of the game, and for how bad the Colts looked last week running the ball, it's a lot of optimism because it shows you they can have a competent run game moving forward.
Yeah, Zach Moss, it was such a massive get back to get him on the field this week because, again, he's a player where he's not going to break off an 80-yard touchdown run like a Jonathan Taylor, but he's the type of guy where no matter what the mess looks like in front of him, he's going to churn out 4, 5, 6 yards. He's going to churn out those positive gains, and we saw that for majority of his runs in this one. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't pretty, but it was some old school football where he's able to get his head down, he's able to fall forward for positive yards, and he makes those 3rd and 10s that we saw last week into 3rd and 2s, 3rd and 3s, 3rd and 4s, maybe 3rd and 5. But those are all positive plays from your running back that get you in position to get a first down. So, yeah, Zach Moss, massive get back for him. Some other pass catchers played really well. Michael Pittman Jr., 8 catches for 56 yards. Will Mallory, in his debut of the season, 2 catches for 49 yards. Had the Colts' biggest explosive play on offense of the entire year on that 43-yard catch. And also, I think Josh Downs, Kylan Granson, Alec Pierce all had really solid games as well. They all hauled in their targets when it came their way. I mean, Granson had that one high drop-ish play early in the game from Anthony Richardson. But for the most part, I think all the Colts pass catchers and weapons and running backs played really well in this game. They all showed that, they belong to be out there, and they all made some plays happen.
Yeah, and I thought the offensive line was really solid as well. Even with Ryan Kelly going out with his own concussion and Wesley French coming in, I thought he did a solid job. But you had mentioned this with kind of the down and distance stuff. When Shane Steichen was asked about some of the offensive hardships last week, down and distance, especially, getting something positive on 1st and 2nd down and not just getting stuffed and, no yardage or losing yardage, whatever, on those early downs, that goes a long way to getting 3rd and manageables. And then last week, it was something real bad. It was like 3 of 15 or something combined on 3rd and 4th downs. It was just really uneven.
I want to say it was 2 of 12 on 3rd and 1 of 5. So it was 3 of 17, I believe, last week.
Yes, it was a really terrible number. So today you look at, they didn't even have to attempt a 4th down because 3rd down was going pretty well, 6 of 12. And then they were 1 of 4 in the red zone last week, I think, 4 of 4 this week.
Yep.
So a lot more efficient. They were getting the yards when they needed to early in the down and distances. So that was one of the biggest reasons why they were able to score 31 points.
Yep.
So they were able to execute what they wanted to do a lot better today. And I just feel like that's something we really haven't been able to say about a Colts offense in a very long time.
Yeah. Again, we might be talking like nonchalantly here, but like this is the best a Colts offense has looked since Phillip Rivers, 2020? Like even those 2021 seasons or whatever, like maybe the Jonathan Taylor game against the Buffalo Bills, or maybe the Jets game as well, that same season where they just destroyed those two teams. Maybe you could say those games, the offense looked a lot better from start to finish, but the offense just could do what they really wanted to in this one. Like, sure, you wanted to see more first downs in the second half, but like the offense was able to really do what they needed to in this one. They were able to run the ball well. They were able to throw the ball well. They had a couple of downfield plays from Will Mallory, Alec Pierce had a 20-yard catch. I think Michael Pittman Jr. had a 20-yard catch to start the game too. Like They had 2 big runs from Anthony Richardson. Like, they were just able to kind of do what they needed to in this one. And on top of all that, I don't want to, throw this aside. The Colts offensive line, 0 sacks allowed. 1 quarterback hit, 0 sacks allowed. Perfect. The stinkometer, they're fine. They're doing good right now, Jake.
Yeah.
They're doing good. So
that leads me to think Anthony probably would have had a huge game.
Yeah.
Because like if Gardner's not getting sacked, then Anthony probably isn't either. And he's able to obviously do a lot more.
Yeah, I think it would have been a lot of more wide receiver screens, a lot of quick hitters like they did on that first drive, and then a lot of QB runs as well, which was really working before he went out of that game. So it would have been a huge game for Anthony Richardson, but still a huge game for the Colts offense nonetheless. So far through 2 games, the Colts offense is averaging 27 points per game. Last year, I believe they were like one of the worst, averaging like 15.5 or something, or 16 point something. So massive improvements early this year. We're loving it from the Colts offense. And coming up, we're going to talk about the Colts defense and how, yes, it wasn't pretty in the second half, but they still got the job done. We're going to talk about that here coming up. But first, snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Jake. So we're going to get into the defense here. We're going to talk about the good. We're going to talk about some of the bad. But I need to come out and address it first because it was my big prediction going into the season that Darrell Baker Jr. was going to establish himself as a long-term answer at corner for the Colts. And it was a brutal game. It was an absolutely brutal. I defended last week because those were really hard. Those were really difficult plays for a corner to make on those 2 big catches he allowed. But this week, again, part of it was that the Colts were just winning by so much, and you're trying to force everything inside, and you're trying to kind of get everything to the defense so you can swallow it up. But the effort wasn't there. He looked a little lackadaisical at times, and he was just getting beat like a drum constantly in this one. I don't really have excuses or reasons for him this week. It was a really, really rough game from Darrell Baker Jr. And I think before we even get to the positives here, I do think the Colts need to consider maybe getting Juju Brents up to speed for next week or inserting Jalen Jones into the lineup next week, because this type of game is not going to cut it. Again, we're going to talk about the defense as a whole and how, yes, they gave up a lot of yards passing in this one, but it was mostly in a blowout victory. So it's kind of tough to judge that. But Darrell Baker Jr., it was a really rough game, and I will completely take that take to my that was a horrible take, I guess, by me before the season, because I don't know if he's going to bounce back from this kind of game. It was a brutal game. You hope that it's just, a Rock Ya-Sin Denver Broncos type game where you can bounce back from it. But, oh, man, just from the effort level, from contesting passes to making tackles after giving up receptions, there was just nothing there positive in this game from Darrell Baker Jr. And I just don't have any good things to say about his performance. Of all the great things we could say about the Colts in this game, oh, man, that was one of the roughest games I've seen a Colts corner have.
Yeah, I think we know that Bradley and Ron Miles aren't just going to fully rip the cord yet, but it would be good to see Jalen Jones get some action. I totally agree with you there. Looking in detail, Baker appeared to be the primary defender on Nico Collins most of the day. Collins went off for 7 catches for 146 yards and a touchdown. As bottled up as the Colts had the Texans offense for much of the game, a big play to Collins bailed them out on several drives. Right. Extended a lot of things. And CJ Stroud, he's a guy that keeps his confidence throughout, and he's not really that flappable.
Yeah.
But with how much pressure the Colts were getting on him, they really could have shut him down a lot more. That connection to Collins was just on fire. And the 146 yards wasn't because he had an 80-yard catch. It was a legit averaging 20 yards per catch type of day. So,
right.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing Jones, see what he's got. Doesn't have to be a whole overhaul of his playing time, but
I just need more effort. I look,
yeah,
you're going to get beat when you're a corner. You're going to get beat. Dallas Flowers actually is a great example of this. He gets beat quite a bit. He gets beat, but he's diving for passes. He's making tackles after getting beat. He's playing until the end of the snap. Darrell Baker Jr. on the touchdown he gave up, it's just no effort whatsoever on that tackle.
Yeah.
On multiple other plays where he gets beat inside, it's just very lackadaisical running it down. That fourth down conversion late in the game too, it's like you could have dove and maybe made a play there, but he just kind of pulled up. It's like, I don't want to make this whole segment all about Darrell Baker Jr. Like, we're going to end it right here and go to the positives, but like, man, I don't, you can't have a game like that. Like, what is going on? Like, you just can't have a game like that. But, switching to the positives with the Colts defense, they were all over this Texans offense for most of the game. Again, a lot of their passing yards came either throwing at Baker or just in garbage time for the most of the second half. They had 6 sacks in this game. They constantly had CJ Stroud under duress.
All from different guys too.
All from different guys. Yeah, they had a lot of pressure. They had the forced fumble in the beginning of the game that, made it a 2-score game. And it was basically a 2-score game like the rest of the game from there. And then also the run defense, just outstanding. 26 carries for 52 yards on the ground for the Texans. They couldn't do anything running the ball. Now, the big man that was destroying the run game, obviously, Grover Stewart. Grover Stewart is insane. And he's getting more pass rushing snaps this year too. I think he has like 3 QB hits through 2 weeks as well.
Hey, he called for it.
I'm telling you, Grover's having a breakout season again. Like, it's just Grover season every year, but this is another breakout season for Grover. He's been just he's been outstanding through 2 weeks. He was one of the best players on either team today.
Same with Buck. Like, they're just getting really solid performances out of their interior. And I thought it was probably Grover a little more than Buck, but Buck did call game at the end and sacked Stroud to end the whole thing. But the defensive line in general, we've called this group really deep and that they needed to step up and do some things, and they have to. 2 games. Kwity Paye out there with another sack. Samson Ebukam had a solid game.
Oh, Samson Ebukam was awesome. Samson Ebukam was destroying really Josh Jones.
Early on, too.
Oh, gosh. Beat down. Yeah, Samson Ebukam, I think, was the best rusher in this game for the Colts. But DeForest Buckner, great. Kwity Paye had a great game. Taven Bryan had a sack. Dio had the forced fumble. Yeah, like EJ Speed had a sack. It was just the front 7 for the Colts is such a strong point right now for this team, where it's like you want to see this secondary come along a little bit faster, even though they're a young group. But this front 7 is so good. This front 7 is really, really good for the Colts right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that can kind of cover up for some of the things in coverage because they can get to the ball quickly. But at a certain point, those, the cornerback situation will have to get figured out. But no, overall, really good. Speaking of someone in the secondary, I thought Kenny Moore had a really good game.
Yeah,
there was one play in particular. He came on a blitz against Stroud, and he had Stroud moving out. Stroud, fake the pass. A lot of guys jump and take themselves out of the play at that point. He stayed grounded, stayed with it, totally made the play a failure. I thought that was so impressive for being something that's not going to be in the box score. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, Kenny's been really strong to start the first 2 weeks. Again, you wish you could say it about the whole secondary. You want to see a little bit more from the rest of the secondary. But yeah, I think Kenny's been back to Kenny self, which is nice. A lot of confidence. He's coming up and hitting like he always does. He's not getting beat much in coverage. Like, we've seen very, very good Kenny Moore to start this season.
Yeah, I think it was an episode right before the season where I said, they need Kenny Moore to step up and be the Kenny Moore of old, because he pretty quickly earned a master's degree in Matt Eberflus's defense back then and became one of the most dangerous defenders in the league. And he's already looking so much more comfortable in this defense year 2 of Bradley. If he gets that mastery of this defense, he's able to do so many things outside of the structure. Like, he can bait guys. He just has instincts that not everybody has. And so when you have a player like that, just playing at that level, it's really important.
Yep. And then one more thing before we close out the show, before we close out talking about the defense here, Jake, the Colts so far have 8 sacks through 2 games. Your prediction was that they were going to break a record, right?
40. Yeah, it's the record is 46 by the 2005 team.
Okay,
they're on pace
for 68 right now. They're on pace for 68 right now.
That's a lot. You tried to push me to say that they would get 60, and I said that was too rich.
Yeah, as of right now,
I still think that's pretty rich, but I feel confident in saying they could break that Indy era record, though.
Oh yeah, I mean, as of right now, I think we're 12 QB hits, 8 sacks through 2 games. This Colts front 7 is playing some really great football. They have one of the best run defenses in the league right now too. So if anything else about this Colts defense, you want to be concerned about the secondary, sure, I understand it. Be concerned about the secondary, but this front seven, they look ready. They look ready. They look great, from linebacker depth to defensive tackles and defensive tackle depth to the pass rushers off the edge. This looks like the best front seven of the Chris Ballard era, which is really fun to see. And we'll see them really tested next week against one of the best quarterbacks in all of football in Lamar Jackson. So, if you guys don't already, follow at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, at Zach Hicks 2, all on Twitter, because we'll be back with you guys all week to talk about Colts Texans, reviewing that game, but also getting you guys ready for Colts and Ravens. So everydayers, again, follow us there on social media, subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. We'd love your guys' ratings and reviews, and we'll see you guys back here Tuesday morning to talk the Colts.